Okay, within the Code of Federal Regulations, I'm reading about Truth in Lending Act. I'm in Subpart 3, which particularly is 1026.19, certain mortgage and variable rate transactions. A, mortgage transactions subject to RESPA. 1, Roman numeral I, time of disclosures. In a reverse mortgage transaction, subject to both 1026.33 and RESPA, that is secured by the consumer's dwelling, the creditor shall provide the consumer with good faith estimates of the disclosures required by 1026.18 and shall deliver or place them in the mail not later than the 3rd business day after the creditor receives the consumer's written application. Roman numeral 2, imposition of fees. Except as provided in paragraph A1(3) of this section, Roman numeral 3 of this section, neither a creditor nor any other person may impose a fee on a consumer in connection with the consumer's application for a reverse mortgage transaction subject to paragraph A1, Roman numeral 1 of the section before the consumer has received the disclosures required by paragraph A1, Roman numeral 1 of this section. If the disclosures are mailed to the consumer, if the disclosures are mailed to the consumer is considered to have received them 3 business days after they are mailed. Roman numeral 3, exception to fee restriction. A creditor or other person may impose a fee for obtaining the consumer's credit history before the consumer has received the disclosures required by paragraph A1, Roman numeral 1 of this section, provided the fee is bona fide and reasonable in amount. Number 2, waiting periods for early disclosures and corrected disclosures. Roman numeral 1. The creditor shall deliver or place in the mail the good faith estimates required by paragraph A1, Roman numeral 1 of this section not later than the 7th business day before consummation of the transaction. If the annual percentage rate disclosed under paragraph A1, Roman numeral 1 of the section becomes inaccurate, as defined in 1026.22, the creditor shall provide corrected disclosures with all changed terms. The consumer must receive the corrected disclosures no later than 3 business days before consummation. If the corrected disclosures are mailed to the consumer or delivered to the consumer by means other than delivery in person, the consumer is deemed to have received the corrected disclosures 3 business days after they are mailed or delivered. Good girl. That was Roman numeral 2 under number 2 under letter A. Number 3 under letter A, consumer's waiver of waiting period before consummation. If the consumer determines that the extension of credit is needed to meet a bona fide personal financial emergency, the consumer may modify or waive a 7 business day waiting period or the 3 business day waiting period required by paragraph A2 of this section after receiving the disclosures required by 1026.18. To modify or waive a waiting period, the consumer shall give the creditor a dated written statement that describes the emergency, specifically modifies or waives the waiting period, and bears the signature of all the consumers who are primarily liable on a legal transaction. Pre-printed forms for this purpose are prohibited. Number 4, notice. Disclosures made pursuant to paragraph A1 or paragraph A2 of this section shall contain the following statement. You are not required to complete this agreement merely because you have received these disclosures or signed a loan application. The disclosure required by this paragraph shall be grouped together with the disclosures required by paragraphs A1 or A2 of this section. All right, now we're in letter B, certain variable rate transactions. Except as prohibited in paragraph D of this section, if the annual percentage rate may increase after consummation in a transaction secured by the consumer's principal dwelling with a term greater than 1 year, The following disclosures must be provided at the time the application form is provided or before the consumer pays a non-refundable fee, whichever is earlier, except that the disclosures may be delivered or placed in the mail not later than 3 business days following receipt of a consumer's application when the application reaches the creditor by telephone or through an intermediary agent or broker. Number 1, the booklet titled Consumer Handbook on Adjustable Rate Mortgages or a Suitable Substitute. 2, a loan program disclosure for each variable rate program in which the consumer expresses an interest. The following disclosures, as applicable, shall be provided. Roman numeral 1, the fact that the interest rate, payment, or term of the loan can change. Roman numeral 2, the index or formula used in making adjustments, and a source of information about the index or formula. Roman numeral 3, an explanation of how the interest rate and payment will be determined, including an explanation of how the index is adjusted, such as by the addition of a margin. 4, a statement that the consumer should ask about the current margin value and current interest rate. 5, the fact that the interest rate will be discounted, and the statement the consumer should ask about the amount of the interest rate discount. Roman numeral 6, the frequency of interest rate and payment changes. Roman numeral 7, any rules relating to changes in the index, interest rate, payment amount, and outstanding loan balance, including, for example, an explanation of interest rate or payment limitations, negative and an interest rate carryover. Roman numeral 8, at the option of the creditor, either of the following. A historical example based on a $10,000 loan amount, illustrating how payments on the loan balance would have been affected by interest rate changes implemented according to the terms of the loan program disclosure. The example shall reflect the most recent 15 years of index values. The example shall reflect all significant loan program terms such as negative and, interest rate carryover, interest rate discounts, and interest rate and payment limitations that would have been affected by the index movement during the period. B, the maximum interest rate and payment for a $10,000 loan originated at the initial interest rate, index value plus margin, adjusted by the amount of any discount or premium, and in effect as of the identified month and year for the loan program disclosure, assuming the maximum periodic increases in rates and payments under the program, and the initial interest rate and payment for that loan, and a statement that the periodic payment may increase or decrease substantially depending on changes in the rate. Roman numeral 9, an explanation of how the consumer may calculate the payments for the loan amount to be borrowed based on either A, the most recent payment shown in the historical example in paragraph B2, Roman numeral 8A of this section, or B, the interest rate used to calculate the maximum interest rate and payment in paragraph B2, Roman numeral 8B of this section. Roman numeral 10, the fact that the loan program contains a demand feature. Roman numeral 11, the type of information that will be provided in notices of adjustments and the timing of such notices. And Roman numeral 12, a statement that disclosure forms are available for the creditor's other variable rate loan programs. Letter C, electronic disclosures. For an application that is accessed by the consumer in electronic form, the disclosures required by paragraph B of this section may be provided to the consumer in electronic form or on or with the application. D, information provided in accordance with variable rate regulations of other federal agencies may be substituted for the disclosures required by paragraph B of this section. Letter E, mortgage loans secured by real property, early disclosures. Number 1, the provision of disclosures, and Roman numeral 1, creditor. in a closed-end consumer credit transaction secured by real property, other than a reverse mortgage subject to 1026.33, the creditor shall provide the consumer with good faith estimates of the disclosures in section 1026.37. Mortgage broker, Roman numeral 2. If a mortgage broker receives a consumer's application, either the creditor or the mortgage broker shall provide the consumer with the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral I of the section, in accordance with paragraphs E1, Roman numeral 3 of this section. If the mortgage broker provides the required disclosures, the mortgage broker shall comply with all requirements of this paragraph E. The creditor shall ensure that such disclosures are provided in accordance with all requirements of this paragraph E. Disclosures provided by a mortgage broker in accordance with the requirements of this paragraph E satisfy the creditor's obligation under this paragraph E. Something's telling me this paragraph E is going to be like ridiculously long. And if it's just going over good faith estimates, now known as loan estimates, I'm probably going to skip it just because it's going to be in other areas of my review, such as RESPA. But we'll get around to that when we make that determination. Okay, so we're still under letter E and 1B, capital B, under Roman numeral 2. If a mortgage broker provides any disclosure under 1026.19e, the mortgage broker shall also comply with the requirements of 1026.25c. Roman numeral 3, timing. So Roman numeral 1 was creditor, Roman numeral 2 was mortgage broker, and Roman numeral number 3 is timing. A. The creditor shall deliver or place in the mail the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section, not later than the third business day after the creditor receives the consumer's application, as defined in 1026.2a3. But as set forth in paragraphs E1, Roman numeral 3c of this section, the creditor shall deliver or place in the mail the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral I of this section, not later than the seventh business day before consummation of the transaction. C. For a transaction secured by a consumer's interest in a timeshare plan described in 11 United States Code 101-53D, paragraph E1, Roman numeral 3B of this section does not apply. Roman numeral 4, receipt of early disclosures. If any disclosures required under paragraph E1I of this section are not provided to the consumer in person, the consumer is considered to have received the disclosures 3 business days after they are delivered or placed in the mail. Roman numeral 5, consumer's waiver of waiting period before consummation. If the consumer determines that the extension of credit is needed to meet a bona fide personal financial emergency, the consumer may modify or waive the 7 business day waiting period for early disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 3B of this section. After receiving the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section, to modify or waive the waiting period, the consumer shall give the creditor a dated written statement that describes the emergency, specifically modifies or waives the waiting period, and bears the signature of all the consumers who are primarily liable on the legal obligation. Printed forms for this purpose are prohibited. Roman numeral 6, shopping for settlement service providers. A. Shopping permitted. A creditor permits a consumer to shop for a settlement service if the creditor permits the consumer to select the provider of that service subject to reasonable requirements. Letter B, under shopping for settlement service providers. Disclosure of services. The creditor shall identify the settlement services for which the consumer is permitted to shop in the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section. Where are we? C, written list of providers. If the consumer is permitted to shop for a settlement service, the creditor shall provide the consumer with a written list identifying available providers of that settlement service and stating that the consumer may choose a different provider for that service. The creditor must identify at least one available provider for each settlement service for which the consumer is permitted to shop. The creditor shall provide this written list of settlement service providers separately from the disclosures required by paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of this section, but in accordance with the timing requirements in paragraph E1 Roman numeral 3 of this section. 2. Pre-disclosure activity. Roman numeral 1, imposition of fees on consumer. A. Fee restriction. Except as provided in paragraph E2 Roman numeral 1b of this section, neither a creditor nor any other person may impose a fee on a consumer in connection with the consumer's application for a mortgage transaction subject to paragraph E1 Roman numeral I of 1 of this section before the consumer has received the disclosures required under paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of the section and indicated to the creditor an intent to proceed with the transaction described in those disclosures. A consumer may indicate an intent to proceed with a transaction in any manner the consumer chooses, unless a particular manner of communication is required by the creditor. The creditor must document this communication to satisfy the requirements of 1026.25. Letter B, under pre-disclosure activity, is the exception to fee restriction. If a creditor or other person may impose a bona fide and reasonable fee for obtaining the consumer's credit report before the consumer has received the disclosures required under paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of this section, Roman numeral 2, written information provided to the consumer. If a creditor or other person provides the consumer with a written estimate of terms or costs specific to that consumer before the consumer receives the disclosures required under paragraph E1I of this section, the creditor or such person shall clearly and conspicuously state at the top of the front of the first page of the estimate in the font size no smaller than 12, your actual rate, payment, or cost could be higher. Get an official loan estimate before choosing a loan. The written estimate of terms or costs may not be made with headings, content, and format substantially similar to Form H24 or 25 of Appendix H to this part. Roman numeral 3, verification of information. The creditor or other person shall not require the consumer to submit documents verifying information related to the consumer's application before providing the disclosures required by paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of this section. 3. Good faith determination for estimates of closing costs. 1. General rule. An estimated closing cost disclosed pursuant to paragraph E of this section is in good faith if the charge paid by or imposed by the consumer does not exceed the amount originally disclosed under paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of this section, except as otherwise provided in paragraphs E3 Roman numeral 2 through Roman numeral 4 of this section. Roman numeral 2 under number 3, limited increases permitted for certain charges. An estimate of a charge for a third-party service or a recording fee is in good faith if A, the aggregate amount of charges for third-party services and recording fees paid by or imposed on the consumer does not exceed the aggregate amount of such charges disclosed under paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of this section by more than 10%. B, the charge for the third-party service is not paid to the creditor or an affiliate of the creditor, and C, the creditor permits the consumer to shop for the third-party service consistent with paragraph E1 Roman numeral 6 of this section. 3, Roman numeral 3 that is, variations permitted for certain charges. An estimate of the following charges is in good faith if it is consistent with the best information reasonably available to the creditor at the time it is disclosed, regardless of whether the amount paid by the consumer exceeds the amount disclosed under paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of the section, semicolon A, prepaid interest, B, property insurance premiums, C, amounts placed into an escrow, impound, reserve, or similar account, D. Charges paid to a third-party service providers selected by the consumer consistent with paragraph E1, Roman numeral 6A of the section that are not on the list provided pursuant to paragraph E1, Roman numeral 6C of this section, and E. Charges paid for third-party services not required by the creditor. These charges may be paid to affiliates of the creditor. And Roman numeral 4, revised estimates for the purpose of determining good faith under paragraph E3I and Roman numeral 2 of the section. A creditor may use a revised estimate of a charge instead of the estimate of the charge originally disclosed under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section if the revision is due to any of the following reasons. And you have A, changed circumstance affecting settlement charges. Changed circumstances cause the estimated charges to increase, or in the case of estimated charges identified in paragraph E3(2) of this section, because the aggregate amount of such charges to increase by more than 10%. For purposes of this paragraph, changed circumstance means 1. An extraordinary event beyond the control of any interested party or other unexpected event specific to the consumer or transaction. 2. Information specific to the consumer or transaction that the creditor relied upon when providing the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section, and that was inaccurate or changed after the disclosures were provided. Or 3. New information specific to the consumer or the transaction that the creditor did not rely on when provided the original disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section. And B, changed circumstances affecting eligibility. The consumer is ineligible for the estimated charge previously disclosed because of a changed circumstance, as defined under paragraph E3(4)A of this section, affected the consumer's creditworthiness or the value of the security for the loan. C, revisions requested by the consumer. The consumer requests revisions to the credit terms or the settlement that cause an estimated charge to increase. D, interest rate dependent charges. The points or lender credits charged because the interest rate was not locked when the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section were provided no later than 3 business days after the date the interest rate is locked. The creditor shall provide a revised version of the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section to the consumer with a revised interest rate. The points disclosed pursuant to 1026.37(f)(1), lender credits, and any other interest rate dependent change charges and terms. E, expiration. The consumer indicates an intent to proceed with the transaction more than 10 business days after the disclosure required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section are provided pursuant to paragraph E1, Roman numeral 2 of this section. F, delayed settlement date on a construction loan. In transactions involving new construction where the creditor reasonably expects that settlement will occur more than 60 days after the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section are provided pursuant to paragraph E1, Roman numeral 3 of this section. The creditor may provide revised disclosures to the consumer if the original disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section state clearly and conspicuously that at any time prior to 60 days before consummation, the creditor may issue revised disclosures. If no such statement is provided, the creditor may not issue revised disclosures except as otherwise provided in paragraphs F of this section. Number 4, provision and receipt of revised disclosures. General rule. Subject to the requirements of paragraph E42, Roman numeral 2 of this section, if a creditor uses a revised estimate pursuant to paragraph E3, Roman numeral 4 of this section for the purpose of determining good faith under paragraphs E3, Roman numeral 1 and 2 of this section, the creditor shall provide a revised version of the disclosures required under paragraph E1, Roman numeral 1 of this section, reflecting the revised estimate within 3 business days of receiving information sufficient to establish that one of the reasons for revision provided under paragraphs E3 Roman numeral 4A through C, E, and F of this section applies. Roman numeral 2, relationship to disclosures required under 1026.19 F1, Roman numeral 1. The creditor shall not provide a revised version of the disclosures required under paragraph E1I of this section or on or after the date on which the creditor provides the disclosures required under paragraph F1, Roman numeral 1 of this section. The consumer must receive a revised version of the disclosures required under paragraph E1I of this section not later than 4 business days prior to consummation. If the revised version of the disclosures required under paragraph E1I of this section is not provided to the consumer in person, the consumer is considered to have received such a version 3 business days after the creditor delivers or places such a version in the mail. F. Mortgage loans secured by real property, final disclosures. 1. Provision of disclosures. I. Scope. In a closed-end consumer credit transaction secured by real property other than a reverse mortgage subject to 1026.33, the creditor shall provide the consumer with the disclosures in 1026.38 reflecting the actual terms of the transaction. Roman numeral 2 under letter F. Mortgage loans secured by real property, final disclosures. Timing. A. In general, except as provided in this section in various letters and Roman numerals, the creditor shall ensure that the consumer receives the disclosures required under F1I of this section no later than 3 business days before consummation. B. Timeshares. So that was general timing, timeshare timing. For transactions secured by a consumer's interest in a timeshare plan described in 11 U.S.C. 10153D, the creditor shall ensure that the consumer receives the disclosures required under paragraph F1I of the section no later than consummation. 3. Receipt of disclosures. If any disclosures required under paragraph F1I of this section are not provided to the consumer in person, the consumer is considered to have received the disclosures 3 business days after they are delivered or placed in the mail. Roman numeral 4. Consumer's waiver of waiting period before consummation. If the consumer determines that the extension of credit is needed to meet a bona fide personal financial emergency, the consumer may modify or waive the 3 business day waiting period under paragraph F1 Roman numeral 2A or 2 Roman numeral 2 of this section after receiving the disclosures required under paragraph F1I of this section. To modify or waive the waiting period, the consumer shall give the creditor a dated written statement that describes the emergency, specifically modifies or waives the waiting period, and bears the signature of all consumers who are primarily liable on the legal obligation. Printed forms for this purpose are prohibited. Roman numeral 5, settlement agent. A settlement agent may provide a consumer with the disclosures required under paragraph F1I of this section, provided the settlement agent complies with all relevant requirements under paragraph F. The creditor shall ensure that such disclosures are provided in accordance with all requirements of this paragraph F. Disclosures provided by a settlement agent in accordance with the requirements of paragraph F satisfy the creditor's obligation under paragraph F. 2. Subsequent changes. Roman numeral 1. Changes before consummation not requiring a new waiting period, except as provided in paragraph F2 Roman numeral 2. If the disclosure provided under paragraph F1I of the section become inaccurate before consummation, the creditor shall provide corrected disclosures reflecting any changed terms to the consumer so that the consumer receives the corrected disclosures at or before consummation. But the creditor may omit from inspection items related only to the seller's transaction. Roman numeral 2. Changes before consummation requiring a new waiting period. If one of the following disclosures provided under paragraph F1I of this section becomes inaccurate in the following manner before consummation, the creditor shall ensure that the consumer receives corrected disclosures containing all changed terms in accordance with the requirements of paragraph F1 Roman numeral 2A of this section. A, B, and C. A, the percentage rate disclosed under 1026.3804 becomes inaccurate as defined in 1026.22. B, the loan product is changed, causing the information disclosed under 102638A5 Roman numeral 3 to become inaccurate. Or C, a prepayment penalty is added, causing the statement regarding a prepayment penalty required under 1026.38B to be inaccurate. Roman numeral 3, changes due to events occurring after consummation. If during the 30-day period following consummation an event in connection with the settlement of the transaction occurs that causes the disclosures required under paragraph F1I of the section to become inaccurate, and such inaccuracy results in a change to the amount actually paid by the consumer from the amount disclosed under paragraph F1I of the section, the creditor shall deliver or place in the mail corrected disclosures not later than 30 days after receiving information sufficient to establish that such event has occurred. Roman numeral 4, changes due to clerical errors. A creditor does not violate paragraph F1I of the section if the disclosures provided under paragraph F1I contain non-numeric clerical errors, provided the creditor delivers or places in the mail corrected disclosures no later than 60 days after consummation. Roman numeral 5. Refunds related to the good faith analysis. If amounts paid by the consumer exceed the amounts specified under paragraph E3I or Roman numeral 2 of this section, the creditor complies with paragraph E1 Roman numeral 1 of the section. If the creditor refunds the excess to the consumer no later than 60 days after consummation, then the creditor complies with paragraphs F1I of this section if the creditor delivers or places in the mail correct disclosures that reflect such refund no later than 60 days after consummation. 3. Charges disclosed. Roman numeral 1, actual charge. The amount imposed upon the consumer for any settlement service shall not exceed the amount actually received by the settlement service provider for that service, except as otherwise provided in paragraph F3 Roman numeral 2 of this section. Average charge. A creditor or settlement service provider may charge a consumer or seller the average charge for a settlement service if the following conditions are satisfied. A, B, and C, D, 1 through 4, I guess. A, the average charge is no more than the average amount paid for that service by or on behalf of all consumers and sellers for a class of transactions. B, the creditor or settlement service provider defines the class of transactions based on an appropriate period of time, geographic area, and type of loan. C, the creditor or settlement service provider uses the same average charge for every transaction within the defined class. And D, the creditor or settlement service provider does not use an average charge. 1, for any type of insurance. 2, for any charge based on the loan amount or property value. Or 3, if doing so is otherwise prohibited by law. 4 is a separate section of transactions involving a seller. Roman numeral 1, provision to seller. In a closed-end consumer credit transaction secured by real property that involves a seller other than a reverse mortgage subject to 1026.33, the settlement agent shall provide the seller with the disclosures in 1026.38 that relate to the seller's transaction reflecting the actual terms of the seller's transactions. Roman numeral 2, timing. The settlement agent shall provide the disclosures required under paragraph F4 Roman numeral 1 of this section no later than the day of consummation. If during the 30-day period following consummation an event in connection with the settlement of the transaction occurs that causes disclosures required under paragraph F4 Roman numeral 1 of the section to become inaccurate, and such inaccuracy results in a change to the amount actually paid by the seller from that amount disclosed under that paragraph, the settlement agent shall deliver or place in the mail corrected disclosures not later than 30 days after receiving information sufficient to establish that such event has occurred. Roman numeral 3, charges disclosed. The amount imposed on the seller for any settlement service shall not exceed the amount actually received by the service provider for that service, except as otherwise provided in paragraphs F3 Roman numeral 2 of this section. Roman numeral 4, creditor's copy. When the consumers and sellers' disclosures under this paragraph F are provided on separate documents as permitted under 1026.38 the settlement agent shall provide to the consumer, if the creditor is not the settlement agent, a copy of the disclosures provided to the seller under paragraph F4I of this section. 5. No fee. No fee may be imposed on any person or any part of settlement costs or otherwise by a creditor or by a servicer as that term is defined under 12 U.S.C. 2605(1)(2) for the preparation or delivery of the disclosures required under paragraph F1, Roman numeral 1 of this section. G. Special information booklet at time of application. 1. Creditor provides special information booklet except as provided in paragraphs G1, Roman numeral 2 and 3 of this section. The creditor shall provide a copy of the special information booklet required pursuant to Section 5 of RESPA to help consumers applying for federally related mortgage loans understand the nature and cost of real estate settlement services to a consumer who applies for a consumer credit transaction secured by real property. Roman numeral 1. The consumer shall deliver or place in the mail special information booklet not later than 3 days after the consumer's application is received. However, if the creditor denies the consumer's application before the end of the 3-day business day period, the creditor need not provide the booklet. If the consumer uses a mortgage broker, the mortgage broker shall provide the information booklet, and the creditor need not do so. Roman numeral 2. In the case of a home equity line of credit, subject to 1026.40, a creditor or mortgage broker that provides the consumer with a copy of the brochure entitled When Your Home is on the Line, What You Should Know About Home Equity Lines of Credit, or any successor brochure issued by the Bureau is determined to be in compliance with this section. Roman numeral 3. The creditor or mortgage broker need not provide the booklet to the consumer for a consumer credit transaction secured by real property, the purpose of which is not the purchase of a 1 to 4 family residential property, including but not limited to the following: refinancing transactions, closed-end loans secured by a subordinate lien, and reverse mortgages. 2. Permissible changes. Creditors may not make changes to, deletions from, or additions to the special information booklet other than the changes specified in paragraphs G2I through 4 of this section. Roman numeral 4. So Roman numeral 1, in the complaint section of the booklet, the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection may be substituted for HUD's office of RESPA and the RESPA office. Roman numeral 2, in the avoiding foreclosure section of the booklet, it is permissible to inform homeowners that they may find information on the assistance in avoiding foreclosures at consumerfinance.gov. The reference to the HUD website in the avoiding foreclosure section of the booklet shall not be deleted. Roman numeral 3, in the no discrimination section of the appendix of the booklet, the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection may be substituted for the reference to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. In Bureau of the CFPB and their address and their site, the contact information for HUD's Office of RESPA and Interstate Land Sales may be removed from the contact information section of the appendix to the booklet. Roman numeral 4, the cover of the booklet may be in any form and may contain any drawings, picture, or artwork, provided that the title appearing on the cover shall not be changed. Names, addresses, and phone numbers of the creditor or others, and similar information may appear on the cover, but no discussion of the matters covered in the booklet shall appear on the cover. References to HUD on the cover and the booklet may be changed to references to the Bureau. Alright, so that's the end of 1026.19.